If you grew up in the 1970s, there are moments, quiet, ordinary, beautiful moments, that live somewhere deep inside you. They come back sometimes, when you're alone. Maybe folding laundry, maybe driving with the radio low, and suddenly, you're 8 years old again, sitting on shag carpet, watching cartoons with a bowl of cereal in your lap. The room is still, the world is smaller, and life feels safe. Welcome back to Sleepy Town Radio, where we drift gently through the soft edges of memory. If you're new here, this is a place where we slow down, breathe a little deeper, and remember a quieter America. One neighborhood, one kitchen table, one summer afternoon at a time. Tonight's story is one of those special ones because it belongs to so many of us. We're going back to the 1970s, not the big headlines or famous faces, but the real 1970s, the one you lived. The smell of a library book stamped with a due date, the sound of a wooden screen door slamming shut behind you, the way the world looked from the banana seat of your bike. This was a time before everything was immediate, before screens followed us everywhere. A time when waiting for Saturday morning was half the fun, when every song on the radio felt like it was meant just for you, when a whole summer could pass without a single plan and still feel like the best one you ever had. Some say it was a simpler time. Maybe it was. But more than that, it was a slower time. And in that slowness, there was space. Space to imagine. Space to explore. Space to just be. Tonight, we'll visit the living rooms and school cafeterias, the playgrounds and corner stores that defined our childhoods. We'll ride in the back of a station wagon, chase the ice cream truck down the street, and maybe even stop by a drive-in movie, just to remember what it felt like to fall asleep in the back seat, surrounded by family under the stars. So grab your favorite blanket. Let the world fade for a while. Close your eyes if you'd like. And let's drift back to a time when cartoons came only once a week. Candy cost a penny, and your bicycle could take you just about anywhere. This is the America we remember. This is the magic of growing up in the 1970s. And it all begins on a quiet Saturday morning. It always started with stillness. Saturday morning in the 1970s was sacred. It wasn't just another day off from school. It was a weekly celebration. A quiet pocket of time that belonged entirely to you. Long before the rest of the house stirred, before the chores or errands or the hum of weekend life began, there you were, tiptoeing barefoot across cold linoleum floors, cereal bowl in hand, navigating by the soft blue glow of the television. The living room was your kingdom. The big wooden console TV, nearly a piece of furniture itself, stood like an altar, humming to life as you turned the big, clunky dial. You already knew which channel. You didn't need a guide. You knew the lineup by heart. You'd pour a generous helping of Frosted Flakes or Sugar Smacks, maybe even Cocoa Puffs if you were lucky, and settle into your usual spot. A blanket on the carpet, pillow pulled from the couch, knees tucked in, eyes wide open. And then it began. Schoolhouse Rock. Kicked things off, always with something catchy and clever. Conjunction junction, what's your function? A phrase etched into our collective memory. Somehow those little cartoons taught us more about grammar, history, and government than most school books ever did. Then came the heavy, hitters. The Super Friends lit up the screen with bright colors and booming voices. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all gathered in the Hall of Justice to save the world once again. And of course, the Wonder Twins, Zan and Jaina. Form of a bucket of water. Shape of an ice gorilla. It was ridiculous, and we loved every second. These shows didn't have slick animation or sophisticated plots. They had heart. They had heroes. They had just enough silliness to make us laugh, and just enough magic to make us believe. In those moments, the line between real life and imagination disappeared. You weren't just watching the Super Friends. You were one of them. And the commercials. Oh, the commercials. They were almost as good as the shows themselves. The Trix Rabbit forever denied his bowl of cereal. The Kool-Aid Man bursting through walls with a triumphant, "Oh yeah." Mousetrap board games, Rube Goldberg contraptions, toy cars, dolls and jingles that still play in our heads if we're quiet enough. Everything was bright. Everything was fun. Everything was yours. There were only 3 major networks back then. No cable, no streaming, no DVRs or YouTube playlists. You watched what was on when it was on, and you were grateful. If you missed your favorite show, you had to wait an entire week to see it again. That's what made it special. That's what made Saturday morning feel like a holiday. And as you watched, the world outside slowly came to life. You'd hear the coffee percolator burble in the kitchen, the muffled footsteps of your parents getting up. Maybe your little brother or sister would stumble out, hair tousled, blanket trailing behind them, asking what they missed. You'd make room beside you, because Saturday morning was better when it was shared. There was no rush, no noise, no need to be anywhere else. Just you, your cereal, your cartoons, and time. The block of programming stretched on like a dream. 4 solid hours of joy. Show after show. Laughter layered over music, color, and sound. And then, right around noon, the spell would break. Suddenly, the screen would change. Cartoons faded out, and the adults took over. Golf, fishing, news. It was like the world had remembered it was supposed to be serious again. That's when you knew. It was time to go outside. But those few hours, they stayed with you. They weren't flashy or groundbreaking. They weren't high art. But they were yours. A rhythm in the week that you could count on. A place where your imagination could stretch and play. Even now, all these years later, the memory of those mornings is enough to warm a quiet heart. So many of us grew up in different towns, with different families and different lives. But we all sat on that same living room floor, didn't we? We all heard the same songs. We all laughed at the same silly rabbit. We all believed, if only for a few hours each week, that good guys always won, and the world made perfect sense. And maybe that's why we remember, because Saturday morning wasn't just about cartoons. It was about being a kid. It was about feeling free, and knowing that, for at least one morning, the world had saved a little joy. Just for you. Now let's step forward just a bit. The cartoons have ended. The room has shifted. Your stomach's beginning to rumble again. And in the kitchen, there's something familiar warming in the oven. TV dinners are on the way, and so is the whole family. By early evening, The sunlight outside had begun to soften. The cartoons were long over, the bikes put away, and the afternoon adventures traded for something quieter, something that brought everyone back inside. In the kitchen, the familiar hum of the oven filled the air. Not the microwave. Not yet. This was the age of aluminum trays, oven mitts, and a kind of patience we didn't even realize we had. TV dinners weren't just meals. They were little silver trays of excitement, neatly sectioned, perfectly portioned. Tiny foil compartments holding mashed potatoes with a perfect crater for gravy. Sweet corn that somehow always tasted better than fresh. And a little dessert tucked into the corner like a reward for finishing the rest. Swanson was king. If you were lucky, it was Salisbury steak night, with that mysterious, savory brown sauce that clung to the meat just right. Sometimes it was fried chicken, sometimes turkey and stuffing, and every once in a while, the rarest of prizes, a chocolate brownie half melted and gooey from the oven. Your mom would slide the trays in one by one, careful not to spill. The smell that drifted through the house was unmistakable. A mix of salt and nostalgia, warm and oddly comforting. It wasn't gourmet, but it was familiar. And familiar always tastes like home. No one ate at the table on TV dinner nights. That was part of the magic. Instead, the whole family would gather around the television, furniture rearranged just enough to make room. Dad in his recliner, newspaper set aside, Mom with her knitting or embroidery, her feet curled beneath her. The kids spread across the shag carpet, balancing trays on laps, legs crossed like it was some sacred ceremony. The television would glow in the center of the room, and whatever was on, we watched. Because back then, we didn't choose shows. The shows chose us. Appointment viewing, they called it. The Waltons. The Odd Couple. The Flip Wilson Show. The Carol Burnett Show, if it was a special night. Whatever it was, it didn't really matter. The joy was in the gathering. In hearing your dad laugh out loud, your mom chuckle softly, your brother mimic the characters. The program became a backdrop for something much more important. Togetherness. We didn't scroll. We didn't pause. If you missed it, you missed it. And somehow, that made it feel more precious. Sometimes we argued over what to watch, one channel or another, this show or that. But even the arguments felt warm in hindsight. It meant we all cared. We were all present, all tuned in, not just to the television, but to each other. And those trays, those shiny little trays, meant we were allowed to bend the rules. We didn't need proper plates. We didn't need napkins folded just so. We just needed a lap and a good show. The clink of the fork against the aluminum was a soundtrack of its own, steady and unbothered. Afterward, the trays were rinsed and saved, not always thrown out like today's packaging. Some families kept them for years. They were sturdy, after all, reused for leftovers, craft projects, or casual lunches. They became part of the household rhythm. Looking back now, those evenings didn't seem extraordinary. But that's the beauty of memory. It finds the sacred in the simple. It remembers the warmth of a room, the smell of dinner from the oven, the sound of a laugh track echoing through a house that, just for a little while, wasn't rushing anywhere. It wasn't just about convenience. It was about presence. TV dinners weren't about the food. They were about the ritual, and that ritual of sharing space, of watching something side by side was a small but powerful thread that held families together in the quiet hours after the day had worn down. You may not remember the plot of every show, but you remember where you sat, who sat beside you, the way the tray would wobble if you shifted too fast, the way your parents' voices softened as they settled into the couch, the way the night felt safe, and as the credits rolled and trays were cleared, you knew bedtime was coming soon, but not yet. There was still time to sit a little longer, to stretch out, to watch the next show, even if you were already getting sleepy, because tomorrow would come, and with it, another ordinary day. But for now, everything was just right. And as we move forward into night's journey, let's step into that sweet stretch of summer, when the days felt long and unplanned, and the world outside was just waiting to be discovered. Summer in the 1970s didn't come with a checklist. There were no scheduled camps, no curated learning programs, no color-coded calendars stuck to the fridge. There were just days, long, hot, wide-open days, stretching out like taffy, soft and sweet, pulling further and further as the sun moved overhead. After breakfast, maybe those leftover pancakes from Sunday, maybe just a bowl of cornflakes, you'd disappear out the front door with a casual shout to your mom that sounded more like a question than a statement. "I'm going out." She didn't ask where. You didn't say. Because back then, you just went. Sometimes you had a plan. Most of the time you didn't. You'd meet up with the neighborhood gang, the same ragtag group of kids you saw every day, each with their own roles. The bossy one, the daredevil, the funny one, the one whose house always had popsicles. You knew the rhythm. You knew the rules. And if you didn't, you learned fast. The street was your playground. The world was your map. You'd play kick the can until your legs ached, build ramps out of cinder blocks and old plywood, chalk out elaborate hopscotch grids that claimed the whole driveway. The sidewalks turned into balance beams, the curbs into castles. Everything ordinary became extraordinary when seen through the eyes of a child with nowhere to be. Cars passed less often in those days, and when they did, drivers actually slowed down. You could hear them coming from half a block away, the crunch of tires on gravel, the distant rumble of engines. You'd step aside without a word, wait, and just as quietly, drift back into the street once they were gone. The local creek was the crown jewel of summer adventure. Someone would suggest it in the middle of a game. Want to go to the creek? And just like that, the whole day changed. You'd grab peanut butter sandwiches, mason jars full of Kool-Aid, maybe a pocket full of marbles, and set off on bikes that rattled and squeaked like loyal old horses. At the creek, shoes came off, feet went in. You'd hunt for tadpoles, skip stones, or lie on your back, staring up through the branches, making up stories about clouds that looked like pirate ships and dinosaurs. You didn't think about the time. You didn't worry about sunscreen. You weren't afraid of getting dirty. A little dirt was the price of freedom, and when the sun began to dip low in the sky, you'd notice the shift without needing a clock. The shadows grew longer. The air felt softer. And somewhere in the distance, a porch light would flicker on like a lighthouse guiding you home. That was the signal. One by one, the gang would start to peel off. See you tomorrow. Until it was just you and your thoughts, pedaling back through streets that felt both familiar and wide open, as if the day had somehow made your world bigger. But it wasn't over yet. There was still the front porch. A few of you would gather there, legs dangling off the steps, trading popsicles and half-made-up stories. You'd talk about what you'd do tomorrow. Maybe another game of street hockey. Maybe a treehouse. Maybe nothing at all. And that was the magic of it. You didn't need a plan. The plan was just being there, being outside, being a kid. You learned things during those endless summers, not from books or lessons, but from each other. How to spot poison ivy, how to build trust, how to make a slingshot from a Y-shaped stick and a rubber band, how to keep a secret, how to tell a good story, how to scrape your knee and get back up like nothing happened. Those weren't lazy days. They were full. They were rich. But they moved slower. They unfolded. They allowed space for discovery. You didn't realize it then, but you were learning how to be part of a group, how to lead, how to follow, how to listen, how to laugh until your stomach hurt, how to sit in silence and be okay with it. Looking back, it's not the big moments that stand out. It's the small ones. The damp grass under your bare feet. The squeak of a swing set in the distance. The way Kool-Aid tasted warmer when it came from a reused jar. The way your friends' voices echoed down the street like music. And as you finally walked through the screen door, sunburnt and sleepy, the house felt a little cooler, the air a little thicker with dinner smells, and your heart, somehow, full. Because summer in the 70s wasn't a break from life. It was life. And tomorrow, you'd do it all over again. But first, maybe a quick stop at the corner store. Somewhere along the sidewalk, just a few blocks from home, there stood a place that held more treasure than any toy store or amusement park ever could. The corner store. It went by different names in different towns. Maybe it was a drugstore, a general store, a mom-and-pop shop tucked between houses and overgrown hedges. But to us, it was all the same, a haven of sugar, wonder, and independence. You didn't need much. A few coins, dug from the couch cushions, or slipped quietly from a kitchen jar. Maybe a whole $1 if your grandparents were visiting. Even just a single shiny penny could open the door to a whole world. You'd push that heavy glass door open, and a little bell would jingle overhead, just enough to let the owner know a new adventure had begun. The scent hit you first. Old wood, waxed floors, a hint of tobacco, and the sweet, unmistakable swirl of candy and gum. And there it was, a wall, or maybe just a long display of penny candy, tiny bins filled with magic, Swedish fish, wax bottles with juice inside, Necco wafers, bit o' honey, Tootsie Rolls, Pixie sticks, bazooka bubble gum with a tiny joke folded inside, candy cigarettes we puffed like movie stars, red hots that burned our tongues just enough to make us feel brave. You'd stand there for what felt like ages, eyes scanning, fingers twitching, mentally calculating what combination gave you the most delight for the least amount of money. There was an art to it, a rhythm, a skill passed down from older siblings, traded on bike rides and schoolyards like sacred knowledge. Sometimes the owner, an older man with thick glasses and a slow, friendly voice, would lean over the counter and ask, "Taking your time, huh?" And you'd nod, serious as could be. Just making sure I get it right, because this wasn't just candy. It was freedom. This was your money, your choices, your taste. And when you handed over your small pile of nickels and dimes and watched him scoop your selection into a tiny brown paper bag, you felt something important stir inside. You were doing something on your own. The walk home was a ceremony all its own. You didn't eat it all at once. You took your time. Maybe popped a root beer barrel into your cheek and saved the rest. Maybe made little trades with your friends. 2 Smarties for a Laffy Taffy. Maybe hid your favorite piece under your pillow for later, like a secret between you and the day. Sometimes you'd stop right outside and sit on the curb, swinging your legs, peeling the wax from a piece of bubble gum, watching the world pass by while your jaw worked in silence. You'd hear the screen door slam across the street, the buzz of a lawnmower down the block, a dog barking at nothing in particular. And all of it felt peaceful. The store didn't just sell candy, it sold moments. It was the place you ran to when you had news, when your report card was good, when your grandma gave you $1, when you were bored or happy, or just needed a place that felt like yours. It was where older kids hung out by the soda cooler, leaning on it like they owned the world, where comic books sat in spinning wire racks, where cold glass bottles of orange soda and root beer clinked behind foggy doors, where baseball cards came with hard gum that tasted like cardboard but smelled like summer. And sometimes, if you were really lucky, the store had a gumball machine near the register, a swirl of color inside a glass dome. You'd drop in a penny, turn the metal crank, and wait for the clink of joy as a single gumball dropped into your hand. Blue, red, yellow. Each one a small surprise. Looking back now, the store wasn't very big. It probably didn't have more than 2 aisles. But to us, it felt endless, like walking into a little pocket of the world that existed just for us. No rush, no expectations, just the gentle joy of choosing something sweet and carrying it home in your hand. The world has changed. Candy costs more than a penny. Most corner stores have faded away or been swallowed by bigger names, colder lights, and touchscreens. But that feeling, that tiny, proud feeling of walking out with a paper bag of treasures, is still tucked somewhere deep inside us. It was never really about the candy. It was about the chance to choose, to wander, to wonder, to feel just a little bit grown up in a world that still felt big. And even now, if you close your eyes, you can still hear the bell above the door, still feel the cool of the tile floor, still taste the sugar on your tongue, mixed with a kind of quiet happiness that's hard to explain. Now let's go just a little farther down the road, because as the sun sets and the breeze softens, there's one more place waiting for us, the drive-in movie. There was something magical about a summer evening when your parents said, "Let's go to the drive-in." You didn't need a lot of convincing. Just the sound of those words was enough to send a jolt of excitement through your chest. Because going to the drive-in wasn't just watching a movie. It was an event. A family ritual wrapped in popcorn, soft blankets, and stars overhead. You'd help pack the car. Pillows, lawn chairs, a few faded quilts tossed into the trunk. Maybe some juice boxes, maybe soda and glass bottles. Sometimes there'd be a big brown paper bag of snacks from the corner store you'd visited earlier that day. And if your mom had time, maybe even sandwiches wrapped in wax paper The car ride there felt like a countdown. As you pulled into the gravel lot, the screen stood tall in the distance, white, weathered, waiting. It wasn't sleek or fancy, but it didn't have to be. It was the movies, your own open-air cinema. And it always felt bigger at night. You'd slowly find your spot, easing the station wagon into place, front row or back row, depending on your dad's mood. The windows would roll down with that metallic groan only cars of that era could make, and the summer air, warm, soft, humming with crickets, would drift in. Then came the speaker, a heavy gray box, cool to the touch, hanging on a short metal post. Your dad would reach out, unhook it, and hang it on the driver's side window. There was always that satisfying clunk when it clicked into place. The sound it gave wasn't perfect, tinny, a little fuzzy around the edges, but it was enough. It was yours. While the sun dipped low behind the screen, kids spilled out of their cars, running barefoot across the gravel. You joined them. Maybe there was a playground near the front, a metal slide, swings that creaked, merry-go-rounds that spun too fast. You'd play until the screen flickered to life, the first previews crackling against the darkening sky. That was the signal. Back to the car, back to the blanket in the hatchback. You'd lay flat on your stomach or curl against your sibling, popcorn bowl balanced between you. Maybe your mom handed you a paper napkin. Maybe your dad leaned back in the front seat, his silhouette still and calm. Then the movie began. The opening credits lit up the night. Giant faces, giant explosions, giant everything. Even a cartoon short if you got there early. It didn't matter what the film was, action, comedy, a double feature you probably wouldn't stay awake for. It was being there that mattered. The sound from the speaker mixed with laughter from nearby cars, the rustle of candy wrappers, the occasional flash of headlights pulling in late. Above you, stars blinked in quiet approval. Below, the world stood still, and somewhere in the middle of the second act, you started to get sleepy. Your body sank deeper into the blanket. Your eyes got heavy. The voices on the screen turned softer, more distant. You'd blink once, twice, and drift off with the faint smell of popcorn still in your nose. If you were lucky, you'd wake up just as the credits rolled, your dad's voice gently nudging you awake. Or maybe you'd stay asleep all the way home, carried from the car to bed, dreaming of car chases and space battles and laughing faces on a screen that had now gone dark. What made the drive-in special wasn't the movie. It was the feeling, the gathering, the glow. The way families came together under the stars without distractions. No phones, no scrolling. Just the quiet comfort of being beside people you loved, watching something silly or grand or beautiful unfold. And maybe, just maybe, that's why those memories linger. Because the drive-in wasn't about escape. It was about pause. A pause in the week. A pause in the chaos. A chance to sit still. To share. To simply be together. Even now, when you pass an empty lot or see an old speaker post rusting in the weeds, something stirs. You remember the hum of the movie against the hush of the night. You remember the way your dad tapped the speaker, trying to fix the static. You remember lying there, half awake, wholly content, and even though most of those drive-ins are gone, their echoes remain, somewhere inside us all. Now, let's leave the gravel lot behind. The sky is darker now, and bedtime is still a little ways off. Let's go back to where we started, to school lunches, cafeteria trays, and the smell of sharpened pencils and pink erasers, because next up, it's time to remember school days. There was a rhythm to school days in the 1970s. It started just as the sun was lifting over the rooftops, when the streets were still quiet and the air had that early morning crispness. You'd slip on your jeans or corduroys, maybe a shirt with a pointed collar or some iron-on decal that had already started to peel. Your lunchbox clanged just a little as you grabbed it, metal against metal, full of promise and maybe a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. The walk or bike ride to school wasn't rushed. There were no text messages, no earbuds, no carpool lines stretching for blocks. Just you, maybe a friend or two, your breath visible in the autumn air, trading jokes or Pokemon cards, or more likely back then, just stories about what you'd watched on TV the night before. School buildings were a world of their own. Cement block walls painted pale green. Big metal radiators that clanked and hissed in winter. Bulletin boards covered in construction paper and laminated leaves in October. Snowflakes in January. Hearts in February. You could feel the year change by the decorations alone. You found your desk, your own little space, usually carved with initials from a kid long gone, and settled in as the first bell rang. A soft electric buzz, or maybe the classic handheld bell shaken by the teacher as she stood at the doorway. The Pledge of Allegiance came next, of course. Everyone stood, hand to heart, eyes on the flag in the corner. And then the day began. Math, reading, spelling tests on Fridays, multiplication tables drilled with sing-song repetition. You'd write in wide-lined notebooks with a number 2 pencil that always seemed to break when you needed it most. Sometimes the teacher would wheel in the TV cart and you'd all hold your breath, hoping it meant a special program or film strip. The overhead projector was sacred technology. The teacher's handwriting appeared in glowing script on the wall as she moved plastic transparencies across the glass. If you got called up to write on it, you felt like royalty. Classrooms were full of sound. Chalk squeaking on the board, the snap of binders closing, the rustle of paper airplanes passed when the teacher turned around. You learned not just from textbooks, but from the kids around you. The way someone whispered answers, or the way someone else doodled comic strips in the margins. And then, of course, there was lunch. You knew when it was coming. You could hear the clatter of trays 2 classrooms away. The scent drifted in through the vents, a mix of reheated pizza squares, canned peaches, and something that vaguely resembled gravy. But before lunch, there was recess. Out on the blacktop, chaos reigned, in the best way. Kickball games, Red Rover, jump rope with songs passed down from older kids. The monkey bars were higher back then, or at least they felt that way. You pushed yourself to the top, calloused palms gripping cold metal, proud of your bruises like they were medals. Back inside, the afternoon yawned open. Maybe it was art class with big bottles of tempera paint and brushes stiff from yesterday's cleanup. Maybe it was science, mixing vinegar and baking soda with wide eyes. Maybe it was library time, flipping through a copy of Charlotte's Web or The Boxcar Children, while the smell of old paper and wooden shelves surrounded you like a hug. You never had a phone in your pocket. You didn't Google anything. If you had a question, you raised your hand. or you looked it up in an encyclopedia that weighed more than your backpack. You weren't always excited to be there. Some days were slow, some lessons were hard. But looking back, there's a strange comfort in the simplicity of it all. The final bell rang around 3 o'clock. Backpacks were slung over one shoulder, lunchboxes now lighter, maybe with a crumpled napkin and half a cookie left inside. You met your friends at the bike rack or by the flagpole. Some went to the corner store. Some went home. Some just wandered, kicking pebbles, talking about cartoons and what they were going to do that weekend. And through it all, there was this quiet sense of growing. You didn't notice it then, but each of those days, each pledge, each worksheet, each recess game was shaping you, teaching you how to wait your turn, how to speak up, how to sit still, how to be kind, how to be brave in small, ordinary ways. Now, when you pass by an old school building, it hits you. The smell of paste and erasers, the sound of sneakers squeaking on tile, the low murmur of kids reciting times tables, the memory of your name called in roll call, reminding you that, yes, you were there, you belonged. And as we leave those classroom hallways behind and step back into the light of memory, the day isn't quite over yet. There's still more to remember. The cafeteria, the pizza squares, the friends you sat beside, the games you played, the laughter that echoed, and the joy of being a kid when the world was still small enough to understand. So come along. Let's head down the hall together and into the lunchroom. It's just about time for recess. By the time the big hand hit 12, your stomach was already grumbling. You could hear the sounds before you even got there. The distant clatter of trays, the low hum of hundreds of voices echoing through tiled walls, the occasional screech of a chair dragged too quickly across the floor. And then, finally, lunch. The cafeteria of a 1970s school was a world all its own. You stepped into a room that smelled of tater tots and mystery meat, of overcooked vegetables and chocolate milk. Not unpleasant, just distinct. The kind of smell you can't describe, but would know instantly if it hit you today. You shuffled forward with your beige plastic tray, passing down a metal rail, your eyes scanning the steam trays lined with food. A lunch lady in a hairnet smiled without showing her teeth, spooning out ladlefuls of mashed potatoes, or dropping a pizza square onto your tray. Always a pizza square, never a slice. That pizza was legendary. A rectangle of doughy crust, orange-red sauce that somehow always tasted the same, and a layer of melted cheese that could stretch forever if you tried. You'd peel it apart carefully, as if it were treasure. And somehow, it always was. Next to the main dish came the sides. Maybe canned peaches in syrup. Maybe green beans that had surrendered long ago to the heat. Maybe a scoop of Jell-O that wobbled on its own with ghostly precision. And always, a little carton of milk. White if you were late, chocolate if you were lucky. You found your seat among the same group you always sat with. Seating was unspoken. Everyone just knew where they belonged. You'd trade chips for cookies, joke about gym class, and try to guess what was for lunch tomorrow, as if it really mattered. The sound of lunch was something special, loud but warm, trays thudding, laughter bouncing off cinder block walls, someone drumming with plastic utensils, a friend trying to chug their milk too fast and failing spectacularly. Sometimes there was music playing from a battered old speaker. Sometimes a teacher walked the aisles, pretending to keep order while sneaking a sip of coffee from a worn thermos. And then, just as fast as it began, lunch was over. But the day wasn't done yet. Next came recess. If lunch was a refuel, recess was an explosion, a release, a mad dash for the playground doors. You didn't walk, you ran. You burst into the sunlight like it was the first time you'd ever seen the sky. The blacktop was hot, the air buzzing with energy. Kickballs bounced. Jump ropes slapped the pavement in rhythm. There were games of Red Rover, Foursquare, and freeze tag that seemed to involve the whole school at once. The jungle gym was made of metal. It baked in the sun and bit your hands in winter, but that didn't stop you. You climbed, hung, flipped, and jumped like you were invincible. Because in that moment, you kind of were. The monkey bars were a proving ground. The slide was always faster in your memory. The merry-go-round? A thrill ride powered only by the reckless strength of your friends. You played games you made up on the spot. Secret club handshakes. Rock collections hidden behind bushes. A peanut butter sandwich left on a bench. Uneaten, but honored. Some kids sat in the shade, trading stickers or talking about TV shows. Some wandered, hands in pockets, thinking quietly, even at that age. Recess made space for everyone. The loud, the quiet, the wild, the shy, and just when you thought it might last forever, the whistle blew. You froze, looked toward the teacher. Time to line up. You dragged your feet, but you obeyed. Because even in freedom, there was rhythm, and the day had to go on. Back inside, the heat clung to your shirt. Your cheeks were red. Your hair stuck up in wild directions. But your heart was full. There was something sacred about that hour between math lessons and science class, about plastic trays and monkey bars, about the chaos of kids just being kids. Years later, you might not remember what was on the test, but you'll remember the taste of chocolate milk, the feel of hot pavement under your sneakers, the sound of a friend calling your name across the playground. You'll remember how alive it all felt, and maybe, just maybe, you'll close your eyes, just for a moment, and smile, because somewhere inside you, the cafeteria doors still swing open, the lunch bell still rings, and a part of you is still there, laughing, running, being exactly who you were. Now, as the day begins to fade, let's turn towards something a little quieter. Let's talk about the seasons that gave us joy, the special days we waited for with wide eyes and hopeful hearts, the holidays, and all the magic they brought. Some memories sparkle a little more than others. They arrive wrapped in lights and laughter, in whispers and wrapping paper, in cinnamon and costume glue. They come with countdowns and calendars marked in red ink. Because when you were a kid in the 1970s, few things were more magical than the days you spent waiting. Anticipation was a kind of joy all its own. You didn't need instant gratification. You had patience. You had imagination. And the build-up was often better than the day itself. Let's start with Halloween. You felt it coming long before October 31st. The air got cooler. The trees turned gold. Grocery store aisles filled with candy corn and orange cellophane. You'd start planning your costume. Maybe something homemade. Maybe a plastic mask with an elastic string and a vinyl smock. Batman. A witch. a hobo. Something simple. Something that didn't need batteries. You'd carve pumpkins on the kitchen table, scooping out gum with a spoon, the smell earthy and strange. And when the night finally came, you'd hit the sidewalks with a pillowcase in hand, your feet crunching leaves, your heart pounding with sugar-fueled glee. Porch lights glowed like beacons. Some houses gave full-size bars. Others handed out popcorn balls or pennies. And you said thank you at every door, because that's just what you did. Then came Thanksgiving, a day that felt big and slow all at once. The house smelled like something warm: turkey, sage, pie crust. You'd watch the Macy's parade on a fuzzy TV screen while the adults moved busily in the kitchen. There was football, naps on the couch, and the clink of silverware as everyone sat down together. It wasn't flashy, but it was full. And then, the grand finale. Christmas. Everything changed after Thanksgiving. Suddenly, every store had garlands and Bing Crosby. You circled toys in a catalog, left hints on the fridge, wrote letters to the North Pole with careful handwriting. You stared at the tree lights until your eyes blurred. You shook presents gently when no one was watching. You counted the days and counted them again. Advent calendars with chocolate doors, window displays at the local 5 and dime, school art projects that involved glitter and Elmer's glue. You made ornaments from popsicle sticks and gave them to your parents with pride. On Christmas Eve, you could hardly sleep. The house was quieter than usual. You might hear Bing Crosby again, drifting in from the radio, or your parents wrapping things behind a closed door, or the heater kicking on in the middle of the night while you lay awake, listening for sleigh bells that never came, but still might. Then came morning. Stockings first, always. Then presents, one at a time. You didn't tear through everything in 5 minutes. There was rhythm, there was wonder, there was family. Someone handed gifts out. Someone else cleaned up the wrapping paper. Someone brewed coffee. You wore new pajamas all day, or tried out your new toys on the living room rug. And once it was over, you remembered it. All of it. Even now, you can still feel the static on your wool sweater. You can still hear the sound of scissors on curling ribbon. You can still taste the candy cane melting in your cheek. Time folded itself into those days. But it wasn't just the big holidays. Your birthday felt just as grand. There was cake, maybe homemade, maybe from a box, but it was yours. There were cards signed in big, loopy handwriting from cousins and aunts. There was that one toy you dreamed about, sitting on the table, still in the box. You blew out candles with a wish that you believed would absolutely come true. And the wait for your birthday, that might have been the best part of all, counting down the days, reminding everyone how close it was, feeling special in a world that sometimes forgot how small you were. Even the last day of school had its own kind of holiday glow, the smell of summer just starting. Yearbooks passed and signed, desks cleaned out, the sound of the final bell before 3 whole months of freedom. You walked out of that building like you were stepping into sunlight for the first time. And in a way, you were. You see, back then waiting wasn't a burden. It was a gift, because when things weren't instant, they mattered more. When you had to wait, you had time to dream. You had time to imagine. You had time to feel it coming. And that feeling, that soft, golden anticipation, is something you still carry with you, Even now, when you hear a bell ring, or see the first leaf fall, or smell a whiff of cinnamon in late October, something stirs. Some old joy. Some small spark of childhood. So here's to the holidays we waited for, to the birthdays that made us feel like the center of the universe, to the Decembers that glowed, to the Octobers that thrilled, to the mornings that arrived exactly when they should. And now, let's follow that feeling, out the door, into the station wagon, down the road, on a journey through summer skies and paper maps. Let's take a trip together, the kind we used to dream of. It's time for a summer road trip. Summer didn't feel real, not truly, until the road trip began. You'd wake up early, too early, dragging a blanket down the stairs while the sky was still a soft gray. The station wagon was already packed, the cooler wedged behind the front seats, the back piled with pillows and bags. There was a buzz in the air, the kind of energy that only came from heading somewhere new, or somewhere you'd been 100 times, but still couldn't wait to see again. There was something sacred about the way a family road trip started. No GPS, no tablets, just a paper map, usually creased and a little torn, unfolded across Dad's lap or spread on the hood of the car while he traced the route with a finger. Highways were marked in bold red. Rest stops were circled in pen. Everyone knew the plan, or at least they thought they did. Once you were on the road, time took on a different shape. You had your spot in the back seat, probably next to a sibling. Maybe the vinyl stuck to your legs. Maybe you shared a pillow. You'd watch the trees rush past, count out-of-state license plates, and look for cows or water towers just to pass the time. There was always a stack of Mad Libs, a deck of old-maid cards, maybe even a Viewmaster packed somewhere in the bag. You had your favorite snacks, Hostess fruit pies, Cheez-Its, a warm can of Shasta, and if you were lucky, a trip to Stuckey's or a roadside diner where the jukebox still worked and the pancakes came with whipped cream. Back then, the journey mattered just as much as the destination. Billboards lined the roads like invitations to wonder. See Rock City, Mystery Hole, the world's largest ball of twine. You'd beg your parents to stop, even if just for a picture. And sometimes, if the timing was right, they would. You'd stretch your legs, take a Polaroid, maybe buy a snow globe or a rubber alligator from the gift shop, and feel like you'd captured a memory in your hands. Motels had their own magic too. Not the big fancy chains, but the little ones with neon signs and ice machines, and tiny pools that smelled like chlorine and freedom. The beds had bouncy springs. The blankets were thin and tucked in tight. Sometimes you got lucky, and the TV had more than 3 channels. You'd jump between the beds, fight over who got the side closest to the air conditioner, and fall asleep to the sound of your parents talking quietly at the tiny table by the window. And those moments, the ones that happened between destinations, they stuck. Maybe it was stopping on the side of the road to watch the sun set over a field of corn, or finding a diner with a jukebox that still played 45s, or pulling off the highway to eat sandwiches Mom had made that morning, sitting at a splintered picnic bench under a rest area pavilion. There was a kind of rhythm to it all. Gas, rest stop, stretch, drive, repeat. Sometimes, Dad would get quiet, focused on the road, and Mom would hum to the radio, flipping through stations until she found one that didn't crackle. You might lay your head against the window and trace raindrops with your finger. You might listen to the same song 3 times in a row because it reminded you of something you couldn't quite name, and eventually you'd arrive. Maybe it was the beach, with sand that got into everything and the salt that stayed in your hair for days. Maybe it was a campground where the nights smelled like firewood and bug spray. Maybe it was Grandma's house, where you were greeted with long hugs and iced tea and the sound of a screen door banging shut. But no matter where you went, the getting there was what stayed with you, because it wasn't just about the miles. It was about being together, about being a unit, a little tribe on wheels. It was about sharing space, telling stories, playing car games, getting on each other's nerves, and then laughing anyway. And the drive home had a magic of its own. Everyone was quieter. The snacks were gone. The suitcases were messier. But you were filled with memories, with sunburns, with Polaroids and postcards, and a new sense of the world just a little bigger than before. You'd rest your head against the seatbelt, eyes fluttering closed as the road hummed beneath you. Even now, a certain song, or the smell of warm vinyl, or the sight of a rest stop sign on the highway can bring it all back. That feeling of freedom, that sense of motion, that soft certainty that something good was just up ahead. So here's to the road trips, to the gas station snacks, to the car games and pit stops, to motels with tiny soaps and postcards that said, "Wish you were here," to a map you couldn't fold back the same way again. And as the sun sets outside your window tonight, maybe close your eyes and imagine yourself there again. Seatbelt across your chest, windows cracked just enough to let in the warm summer air, radio playing soft, and miles of highway waiting ahead, because sometimes the best memories were made on the road. There was something sacred about the music in the 1970s. After a long summer road trip, cruising past cornfields, neon motel signs, and quiet stretches of highway, you'd finally be home. But the music, that stayed with you. It was still in your ears when you unpacked your suitcase, still playing softly in your head as you lay in bed, watching the fan spin slow circles above you. You didn't stream songs on demand. You waited for them. You listened on radios with big dials, twisting carefully to catch the local FM station. And when your song came on, your song, you turned the volume up and just listened. Not skipped, not shuffled, just listened. Mixtapes weren't just playlists. They were tiny time capsules, curated with care, recorded onto blank cassette tapes, usually Scotch or Maxell, sometimes with a tiny piece of masking tape over the tabs so you could record over them again later. Every mixtape had a story. One for your best friend, one for a summer crush, one for the drive to Grandma's house. You'd spend hours hovering over the radio, finger on the record button, waiting for that perfect moment to capture your favorite song without the DJ talking over the intro. And when it worked, when the tape clicked just right and the song came through clean, it felt like magic. The labels were always handwritten, sometimes messy, sometimes in perfect bubble letters. You'd write the artist's name, maybe doodle some hearts or stars, and that tape would live in your backpack or on your nightstand or inside the glove compartment of the family car, ready to soundtrack whatever came next. At home, there was usually a big wooden stereo cabinet in the living room, heavy as a dresser, lined with shag carpet underneath, the kind that opened like a treasure chest. Inside, vinyl records with thick sleeves, maybe a few 8-tracks tucked off to the side, the smell of old cardboard, the soft crackle before the music started. That was the sound of Saturday afternoon. And let's not forget the radio DJs. Those warm, familiar voices that felt like friends. They weren't algorithms. They were real people with real opinions and favorite songs and cheesy jokes. You could tell what kind of day they were having just by how they introduced the next track. On Sunday nights, you might catch the top 40 countdown. Casey Kasem's voice was practically a lullaby for a generation. The songs felt like a reward for making it through the week. In the car, music was a shared experience. The radio played something for everyone. Mom might hum along to the Carpenters. Dad would tap the steering wheel to Glenn Campbell. And you, in the back seat, legs sticking to the vinyl, would quietly mouth the words to Afternoon Delight or Dancing Queen, hoping your siblings wouldn't notice. Sometimes the whole family would sing together, off-key and loud, the windows down, the wind blowing through your hair, the tape deck warbling slightly off-pitch, and nobody caring at all. It wasn't about perfect sound. It was about connection. You learned the lyrics from liner notes and scribbled notebook pages, not lyric websites. If you didn't understand a word, you made up your own version. And somehow, those made-up lyrics stuck for years. In bedrooms across the country, kids lay flat on their stomachs, headphones on, thumbing through record sleeves or flipping through Tiger Beat to find the next band to fall in love with. Posters of Fleetwood Mac or the Bee Gees on the wall, a lava lamp glowing softly in the corner, and somewhere on the nightstand, a Walkman. Or maybe just the hope of getting one for Christmas. There was a rhythm to life then, a slow, steady pulse that matched the way music moved through our days, not just in songs, but in jingles, in theme tunes, in the gentle hum of a radio left on in the background while dinner cooked, or dishes were washed, and when the tape got chewed up, and they always did, you learned how to wind it back together with a pencil, carefully, lovingly, because that tape mattered somewhere, maybe still tucked in a shoebox in the attic or the back of a drawer. Those old mixtapes remain, worn, warped, faded, but full of moments. Moments like singing alone in your room after a rough day. Moments like holding the tape recorder to the TV just to catch the theme from your favorite show. Moments like rewinding one song over and over again because it made your heart feel full. These weren't just songs. They were chapters. Soundtracks to a childhood that unfolded slowly, sweetly, and in stereo. So, here's to those late-night recordings, to the static between stations, to the songs that made you feel like someone out there understood you. Press play. Let it spin. The next memory's just a few chords away. There was something magical about a banana seat bicycle in the 1970s. It wasn't just a mode of transportation. It was a passport, a rocket ship, a noble steed. It gave you the freedom to chart your own course and see how far your legs and your courage could take you. Most of us didn't wear helmets back then. Our parents would simply say, "Be back before dark," and that was all we needed. We'd hop on our bikes and disappear into the fabric of the neighborhood. The world felt big, yet close. The sidewalks were our highways, and the world beyond the stop sign was the great unknown. The bikes came in bright colors, metallic reds, sky blues, sunshine yellows. Some had streamers on the handlebars, or baseball cards clipped to the spokes with clothespins, so the wheels would make a steady flapping sound as we raced down the street. Others had sissy bars and high-rise handlebars, making us feel like we were riding choppers straight out of Easy Rider. There was usually no destination. We'd just ride, sometimes in packs, sometimes alone. Riding down to the creek to skip rocks, pedaling to the corner store to spend our pocket change on a bottle of soda or a pack of trading cards. Sometimes we'd race each other, coasting downhill with our feet off the pedals, laughing as the wind whipped past our faces. Freedom had a sound, and it was the whir of spinning tires on pavement. When you found a really good hill, you knew you were in for a thrill. We'd line up at the top and count down before letting gravity do the work. That mix of fear and joy in your belly as you flew toward the bottom. It was unforgettable. Every kid had a scar or a story, a skinned knee, a bent wheel, a time they went over the handlebars and lived to laugh about it later. And there was always the unwritten rule: if someone fell, you stopped and helped them up. There were no cell phones, no parents watching from a distance. It was just us, learning how to take care of each other in small, important ways. Bikes made our worlds larger. They took us to each other's houses, to the park, to secret hideouts in the woods. They carried us to summer adventures and back home again, just in time for dinner. That final pedal toward home as the sky turned golden, that was a kind of magic all its own. There were certain sounds that marked the end of a good ride. The creak of the kickstand, the clink of the bike against the porch, the squeak of a screen door opening as you headed inside, dusty and tired, with the sun still warm on your skin. Sometimes, if you were lucky, your parents would let you go out again after dinner, riding under the streetlights, chasing shadows, feeling like you were part of some quiet, secret world. The neighborhood hushed, and the crickets beginning to sing. Even now, the memory of those rides lingers. Not just the speed or the places we went, but how it all felt. The wind, the freedom, the feeling that you were growing up one pedal at a time. It was a kind of freedom that lives only in childhood, a kind we didn't realize was so precious until it was long behind us. And in those moments, coasting downhill with the whole world ahead of us and nothing holding us back, we were, for just a little while, completely, blissfully free. There was a magic to walking into an arcade in the late 70s. The moment those double doors swung open, your ears were greeted by an electrifying chorus of digital beeps, pulsing synth music, and the metallic clang of quarters tumbling into coin slots. The air inside was thick with the scent of popcorn, warm electronics, and that unmistakable mixture of excitement and freedom. Arcades weren't just rooms filled with blinking machines. They were arenas, sanctuaries, stages. For kids like us, they were where legends were made. You didn't need to be the strongest, the fastest, or the most popular. If you could rack up a high score on Galaga or hold your own in a Pac-Man battle, you earned your place in the pecking order. Pac-Man. Oh, that chomping yellow circle. The waka 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 sound of him gobbling dots was a hypnotic rhythm, echoing through the arcade like a call to arms. You'd watch over someone's shoulder, silently cheering them on as they dodged ghosts, hearts pounding in time with the game. And when someone finally cleared that elusive next level, The eruption of cheers felt like applause on a Broadway stage. Over in the darker corner of the arcade stood Space Invaders. Slow, methodical, relentless. The pixelated aliens inched their way down the screen like an invading army, and every laser shot felt like it counted. Time disappeared in those moments. You weren't a kid anymore. You were Earth's last defense. And then, of course, there were the pinball machines. Bright, mechanical, and unpredictable. Pinball felt like a waltz between chaos and control. You'd nudge the machine gently, praying the tilt sensor wouldn't punish your enthusiasm, flippers snapping furiously as you tried to keep the ball dancing just a little longer. Each machine had its own art, its own soundtrack, its own personality. It was physical, tactile, almost like the machine was alive. But the true currency of the arcade wasn't tickets or prizes, it was quarters. You guarded them like gold, tucked into coin pouches or stacked on the bezel of your favorite machine, declaring, "I got next." And when you finally ran out, that walk home always felt a little heavier, but in the best way, because you knew you'd be back. Some arcades were tiny side rooms in pizza parlors, glowing like miniature galaxies. Others were grand, neon-lit kingdoms in shopping malls with mirrored ceilings and black-light carpets that made your sneakers glow. Regardless of size, they all held the same promise: escape. There was no school, no chores, no parents watching over your shoulder. Just you, the screen, and the battle. And it wasn't always about competition. Sometimes it was the quiet companionship of a friend standing beside you, sharing a soda and a bag of cheese puffs, trading tips on Donkey Kong, laughing at the goofy animations, or just zoning out together under the pulsing lights. The arcade taught us lessons in patience, timing, and perseverance. It rewarded practice, punished recklessness, and always dared you to come back for more. We learned that losing wasn't the end. It just meant one more quarter, one more try. And somehow it all felt bigger than just games. Looking back now, those arcades feel like dreams. Not just because of the machines, but because of the feeling. That rush of walking into a place made just for you, where you were free to lose yourself completely, and where the blinking lights promised endless possibility. It was our little Vegas, our cathedral of color and sound, and in that flickering, buzzing world, we weren't just kids, we were champions. After the noise and neon of the arcade faded behind us, there was something comforting in the hush of the local library. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. Just a low brick building with heavy wooden doors and a smell that was part dust, part old paper, and part magic. Summers in the 1970s had their own rhythm. And for many of us, part of that rhythm meant slipping into the library's cool, quiet walls when the sun outside got a little too hot and the cicadas a little too loud. You'd step inside and instantly feel a kind of peace, like time slowed down and the world whispered instead of shouted. The librarians knew us by name. They didn't need to ask what we were looking for. They just smiled and pointed us toward the aisle where we'd last left off. For some, it was Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew. For others, it was books about dinosaurs or magic or distant planets. It didn't really matter what you read. What mattered was the feeling. That thrill of pulling a book off the shelf, running your hand along the cover, and knowing the afternoon was about to be filled with wonder. Most of the books had that worn, cloth-bound feel. You'd open the cover, and there it was, the little pocket with the checkout card inside. There might be 5, 10, 20 names before yours, stretching back years. Sometimes, if you looked close enough, you'd find your sibling's name, or even your mom's, written in faded pencil. And you'd smile, imagining them reading those same pages when they were your age. There was a summer reading club, too. Usually just a poster board taped near the front desk with stars or stickers next to each kid's name. But to us, it might as well have been the Pulitzer Prize. Every time you finished a book, you'd get a new sticker, maybe a glittery one, if the librarian was in a good mood. You'd run home and tell your parents proudly, already planning what book to get next. We'd curl up on porch swings or lie on the cool tile floor, legs kicked up on the couch, book propped on our chest. The house could be buzzing with noise, radio playing in the kitchen, siblings laughing outside, but inside the story, it was just us and the words. We sailed pirate ships, solved mysteries, built rockets to the moon. One moment, we were sitting in a small town library. The next, halfway across the world, sword in hand, on a wild adventure. And there was something sacred about reading during a rainstorm. The patter of water on the windows, the smell of wet grass through the screen, and that cozy feeling of being wrapped in words. Maybe there was a blanket pulled over your lap. Maybe a glass of lemonade or a peanut butter sandwich nearby. But always, there was a sense that this was enough. That in that moment, with the rain and the story and the hush of summer, the world was perfectly whole. Even the walk to and from the library was part of the ritual. We'd ride our bikes, baskets rattling with the weight of books, stopping to read the backs of cereal boxes along the way or to pick wildflowers. There was a rhythm to it. Return, check out, read, repeat. And we never rushed. We had all the time in the world. Sometimes you'd bring a stack home so high you could barely see over it, promising the librarian you'd read every single one. And somehow, you did. Not because anyone made you, not for a grade, just for the joy of it. The joy of being swept away, of turning a page and not knowing what came next, of staying up past bedtime with a flashlight under the covers, eyes wide, heart racing. Books were our escape, our passport, our time machine. They didn't need batteries or controllers, just paper and ink and a mind willing to wander. In a decade filled with change, with Watergate, bell-bottoms, and disco balls, the library remained steady, a quiet anchor in a fast-moving world. And though the stories we loved were written by strangers in faraway places, they somehow felt like home. They gave us language for the things we didn't yet know how to say, and heroes to look up to when we were still figuring out who we were. Even now, years later, the memory of those library days lingers. The squeak of the floorboards, the slow spin of a ceiling fan, the hum of fluorescent lights. A feeling that the whole world could fit between two covers. That every answer, every adventure, every emotion we'd ever need was just one book away. There were days in summer when the sky would suddenly shift, when the bright blue would give way to a quiet gray, and thunder would rumble softly in the distance like a sleepy giant turning over in bed. Rainy days in the 1970s didn't feel like a disappointment. They felt like a secret invitation to slow down, stay close, and create. The first drops would tap gently on the windows, growing into a steady rhythm against the roof. Nature's lullaby, coaxing the house into a softer hum. Outside, puddles would form along the sidewalks, tree branches would sway, and the world would seem to hush. But inside, something special began to stir. We'd gather at the kitchen table with a mishmash of crayons, some still pointed, others worn down into stubs, and stacks of coloring books, or sheets of plain paper just waiting to be brought to life. There'd be a cup of Elmer's glue, maybe a pair of blunt school scissors, a few cotton balls or pieces of construction paper someone had tucked away in a drawer. Our imaginations would bloom just as wildly as the flowers outside. Rainy days were made for building things. Cardboard box cities, cereal box robots, paper dolls with a dozen outfits we designed ourselves. The living room would become a universe of forts, made from blankets draped over chairs, pillows stacked like castle walls, flashlight beams darting like fireflies in the dimness. In that space, we were explorers, astronauts, or royalty in secret kingdoms no one else could see. There was something beautiful about the simplicity. No screens, no scrolling, just glue-sticky fingers, the waxy scent of crayons, and laughter echoing off the walls. The whole house smelled like warm bread, damp socks, and creativity. It was the scent of a day that didn't follow the usual rules. Sometimes, our parents would join in, Mom showing us how to fold paper into origami swans, or Dad helping cut cardboard wheels for a car made from a shoebox. Other times, they'd just peek in with a smile and a reminder not to cut the good tablecloth. And always, there was music. Maybe it was the radio playing soft in the background, James Taylor, Carole King, or the Carpenters. Maybe it was our own singing, slightly off-key but full of heart. The songs filled the rooms like warmth, curling into every corner and making even the gloomiest day feel golden. Board games made their way off the shelves. Clue, sorry, life. We'd argue about the rules, laugh at each other's terrible luck, and occasionally lose a die in the couch cushions. Jigsaw puzzles were started and often left half done, pieces scattered like confetti across the coffee table until the sun returned. Rainy days were when time stretched, when an hour could feel like a whole adventure, when nobody was rushing off anywhere, and it was perfectly fine to spend an entire afternoon just drawing cats with capes or making finger puppets out of old socks. And when we got tired, we'd curl up in a blanket, book in hand, listening to the tap, tap, tap of the rain against the windows. The world outside blurred behind the glass, green trees swaying, drops sliding like tiny rivers down the pane. While inside, our eyes followed each word, each picture, each moment in our own little storm shelter of stories. There was a kind of safety in those afternoons, a softness. Rain gave us permission to just be, not productive, not impressive, just present. It gave us room to play, to wonder, to build things that didn't have to last but felt important all the same. Looking back, those rainy days feel like slow-motion memories. Dim rooms aglow with lamplight, wet socks left at the door, crayons scattered like fallen leaves. They weren't grand or dramatic, but they were full of color, full of warmth, full of joy that asked for nothing more than a cloudy sky and a little time. And maybe that's what made them so special, because sometimes It's not the sunshine we remember most clearly, but the gentle days when the rain fell and our imaginations rose to meet it. When the rain cleared and the sidewalks dried under the warm afternoon sun, the neighborhood would come alive again, not with traffic or noise, but with laughter, footsteps, and the quiet rhythm of childhood adventure. Back then, we didn't need apps or organized playdates. We had front yards and backyards, dusty alleys and vacant lots. We had our imaginations, and we had each other. Neighborhood clubs would spring up almost without warning. Their headquarters formed beneath porches, inside tree houses, or behind garden sheds. No adult supervision, just a tattered notebook, a set of official rules written in crayon, and a name we all agreed sounded cool: the Shadow Club, or Secret Spies of Maple Street, or Operation Code Red. There were secret handshakes, passwords whispered through fence slats, maps drawn in pencil that led to treasures buried under piles of old bricks or stashed behind bushes. Often, the treasure was just a marble or a comic book, but in our eyes, it might as well have been gold. We were detectives solving mysteries that we made up as we went along. We followed suspicious footprints, interrogated younger siblings, and reported sightings of weird grown-ups who walked their dogs at odd times. A rustling bush could spark a full-blown investigation that lasted the whole day. And there were the games. Oh, the games. Freeze tag and kick the can. Ghost in the graveyard once twilight rolled in. Games with no batteries, no screens, and no real winners or losers. Just kids running until their legs ached, cheeks flushed, hearts full. Some nights, we'd gather near the street lamp with jars in hand, catching lightning bugs. Other nights, we'd draw chalk cities across the driveway, complete with shops, stop signs, and imaginary traffic. Hopscotch grids, 4 square courts. Sidewalks became the canvases of our youth. Treehouses became castles or pirate ships. A plank of wood balanced on a cinder block became a seesaw. A simple rope swing could carry you to the clouds. And when someone scraped a knee or broke a flip-flop, there was always a neighbor's mom with a Band-Aid and a popsicle. Each neighborhood had its characters. The quiet kid with the best slingshot. The bossy one who always wanted to be the club president. The one who could climb the highest without falling, until he did. And always, the friend who had to go home the earliest, but never wanted to. These clubs and games weren't just something to pass the time. They were how we learned to negotiate, to dream, to imagine. They taught us how to work together, how to pretend, how to believe. They gave us a sense of place, of belonging. We didn't realize then that those dusty backyards and uneven sidewalks were sacred ground, that those hours spent arguing over who got to be the hero or whose turn it was to hide were stitching together the fabric of lifelong memory. And there was something about the way dusk would fall during those summer nights, how the air would turn soft and golden, the sky streaked in pink and orange. Parents would start calling us home, voices echoing down the block, screen doors creaking open. One by one, we'd scatter, promising to pick up where we left off the next day. But even after we were tucked into bed, the stories would stay with us. The mystery of the missing comic book. The secret meeting planned for tomorrow. The chalk drawings still visible outside our windows, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Those neighborhood clubs didn't last forever. They faded as we grew taller, as our bikes took us farther, as school and sports and real responsibilities crept in. But deep down, those days still live within us, in the way we still look for connection, still crave adventure, still carry a child's sense of wonder just beneath the surface. They remind us that magic was never something you had to buy. It was built with cardboard, whispered between friends, and lived out under the branches of an old oak tree on a quiet American street. There was a quiet kind of magic tucked between the pages of a comic book, a moment of escape you could fold, carry, and keep, right in your back pocket. After a long afternoon of neighborhood games or bike riding, we'd often find ourselves sprawled out on the living room carpet, cooling off under a whirring ceiling fan, flipping through the latest adventures of Spider-Man, Batman, or the Fantastic Four. The ink was bold, the paper rough, and the colors, though sometimes just a little misaligned, were alive with action. The stories were larger than life, but the way they made us feel was personal. We weren't just reading about heroes. We were them. We imagined ourselves swinging between skyscrapers or racing down alien highways, saving cities or secret bases from destruction. And even if we didn't have superpowers, the act of believing was power enough. Some comics came folded inside the Sunday newspaper. Others were bought from the spinning wire racks at the drugstore, their covers shouting in big block letters, "The Final Battle," or "Special Double Issue." We'd pick them carefully, usually one, maybe two if we'd saved up, and hold them like treasure all the way home. Then there were the trading cards. Thin cardboard windows into entire worlds. Baseball legends, superheroes, movie stars, even dinosaurs. We'd trade them at recess, in the schoolyard, on porches. Sometimes they came with a flat stick of pink gum so hard it could chip a tooth. But we chewed it anyway. There was an unspoken currency to it all. Everyone knew which cards were rare, which ones had bent corners, and which ones you never traded. Not for anything. The prized rookie card, the holographic one, the full team set, rubber banded and carried in your back pocket like a badge of honor. We didn't just collect them. We curated them, lined them up, ordered and reordered, named our favorites. They were proof that something small could matter. That paper and cardboard and a little ink could hold weight in your hands, and even more in your heart. And then came the model kits, stacked high on shelves at the hobby store, waiting to be chosen. Airplanes, battleships, race cars, astronauts and monsters, tanks and dragons, each box promising adventure, assembly required. We'd bring one home, crack open the box, and gently shake out the plastic parts. Every piece had a number. Every instruction was a little puzzle. We'd sit for hours with tiny tubes of glue and careful fingers, trying to line up each wing, each fin, each gear. Sometimes we got it right. Sometimes the glue got everywhere. Painting was its own ceremony. Little pots of tester's enamel, the scent sharp and nostalgic even now. We'd hold our breath while brushing on those bright colors, one layer at a time, waiting for the parts to dry before moving on to the decals. Decals were always tricky, fragile and slippery, like memories themselves. And when the model was done, whether it looked perfect or not, we display it proudly on a dresser or bookshelf, sometimes for years. It wasn't just a thing we made. It was proof that we could make something, that our hands and patience and imagination were enough. Those were slow days, but never empty. We were building tiny worlds, holding stories in our palms, trading wonder, piece by piece. Sometimes we'd gather with a few friends in a bedroom or garage, sharing comics or showing off our latest build. Someone always had a better paint job. Someone else had a comic we'd never seen. We didn't compete. Not really. We admired. We encouraged. We shared. It wasn't about value. It was about meaning. About the feeling you got flipping through worn pages under lamplight, or carefully applying the last sticker to the tail of a model jet just before dinner was called. And even now, long past the days of collecting and constructing, there's a part of us that still looks at a comic book with awe, that still feels the weight of a trading card and remembers the trade that never should have happened, that still finds comfort in the memory of glue on fingertips and the scent of a freshly opened box, full of possibilities, because the real models we were building were ourselves. There was something magical about waking up on a school day and realizing it wasn't going to be an ordinary one. You could feel it before your feet even hit the floor. The buzz of excitement that today was a field trip day. You'd laid out your outfit the night before, probably your best sneakers and a shirt that said you were ready for adventure. And even though you still had to go through the motions of the morning routine, everything felt different, lighter, like the air had been stirred with possibility. We'd climb aboard the big yellow bus, its seats cracked and sticky, windows streaked with yesterday's rain. The diesel engine coughed to life as the driver waved good morning, and soon we were off, bouncing down familiar roads towards something new. Someplace just far enough to feel like a journey, but close enough that we'd be back by 3. The destinations were modest by today's standards. The local history museum, the planetarium, the water treatment plant. But to us, they were grand, giant. We walked through halls of dinosaur bones with wide eyes, watched stars projected onto curved ceilings, giggled at the mannequin pioneers churning butter or teaching in log cabins. Sometimes we'd visit the fire station and try on oversized helmets. Or we'd walk in straight lines through the local chocolate factory, watching gloved hands wrap foil around peanut butter cups. We were handed a tiny sample at the end, and that was enough to make the whole trip feel like Christmas. And every trip had its own soundtrack. The laughter, the squeak of shoes on polished floors, the quiet hum of teachers keeping us in check, and that low, comforting drone of the bus on the way home. We'd stare out the window, the day playing like a highlight reel in our heads, lunch bag empty on our lap, souvenir pencil clutched like a trophy. But field trips weren't the only time we stepped outside the classroom. Life in the 70s was deeply tied to the local community. The town wasn't just where we lived. It was a part of who we were. And that meant parades, bake sales, pancake breakfasts at the VFW, and school plays performed in creaky auditoriums with folding chairs and handmade scenery. Our churches had potlucks with Jell-O molds and deviled eggs. The library had story hours and reading contests. The rec center hosted roller skating nights with disco balls and dollar admission. Every place felt like home, and every adult seemed to know your name, and your parents too. We'd walk to the post office with our mom, help her pick green beans at the farmer's market, tag along to the hardware store where the floor smelled like sawdust and oil. There was a rhythm to small-town life, one that moved slower and kinder. The annual town cleanup day was a big deal. We'd pick up trash with gloved hands and drag black bags to the curb, proud of the role we played in keeping our world neat. Local businesses donated hot dogs and soda, and the mayor, who we usually only saw in pictures, might show up and shake your hand. There was a dignity in it all, in helping paint a fence at the park, in handing out cups of lemonade at Little League games, in waving to your neighbor on a Saturday morning because that's just what you did. And when school partnered with the community, it felt like a bridge between two safe places. Like the day the local firemen came and showed us how to stop, drop, and roll. Or when a veteran visited our class to tell stories that made the room go quiet. Real quiet, in the best way. Looking back, it wasn't just about where we went or what we saw. It was the feeling of being part of something, of knowing we belonged, that our world, while small, was full of doors, and field trips were just one of the many ways we learned how to step through them. The buses, the badge stickers, the sack lunches with your name and marker. They're small things, but when stitched together, they form something lasting. Community wasn't just a word back then. It was a lived experience, one that showed up in firehouse dinners, fourth-grade dioramas, and moments when the whole town came together to clap for a kid in cardboard wings flapping across a stage. And even now, all these years later, when we hear the low rumble of a school bus passing or step into a town square lit up for a festival, something stirs. A memory, a warmth. It reminds us that we were part of something meaningful, that we are part of something still. There was a moment, right as the sun began to dip below the trees, when you first saw the lights. It didn't matter how small the fair really was. To us, it might as well have been the Magic Kingdom. The Ferris wheel spun like a halo against the fading sky, bulbs flickering in warm oranges and reds. You could hear the call of a carnival barker even before your shoes hit the gravel, his voice rising above the music, the laughter, the hum of something wonderful just beginning. Every summer, small towns across America seemed to awaken for a weekend. Parking lots turned into fairgrounds. Schoolyards sprouted tents and food trucks. And the air, oh, the air, smelled of popcorn, funnel cakes, and something fried you couldn't quite name but knew you had to try. You might have arrived with your family, your cousins, or your best friend from down the block. One hand clutching a crumpled dollar, the other your parents', or maybe already stained with cotton candy. The sounds were layered, children squealing on spinning rides, bells ringing from game booths, the deep mechanical creak of the tilt-a-whirl as it jolted into motion. There was the balloon pop booth, where you aimed darts too dull to do damage, but always seemed to walk away with a prize. A plastic whistle or a stuffed banana with sunglasses. And the ring toss, that cruel, impossible game, where the bottlenecks were just wide enough to keep you dreaming. But it wasn't just about the games. It was the people, the way the whole town came together, like a reunion without invitation. You'd bump into your teacher, wearing jeans instead of slacks. The mayor might be flipping burgers in an apron. And your shy classmate? spotted in line for the haunted house, clutching her big brother's hand. Everywhere there was color. Spinning pinwheels, glow sticks, checkered tablecloths, paper lanterns. The local fire department might host a raffle. The high school band played from a flatbed trailer, and there'd be a homemade pie contest where Miss Helen from down the street always seemed to win year after year, and no one minded a bit. And then, of course, there were the rides. The carousel, with its chipped horses and haunting calliope tune, pulled us in like a dream. We'd choose our steed carefully, the black one, always, because it looked the fastest, and hold the brass pole with sticky fingers. Round and round, we'd float past faces lit in golden blur. Parents waved. Grandparents filmed with clunky camcorders. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. The Ferris wheel stood taller than anything else in town. And when you got to the top, just for a moment, everything felt still. You could see your whole world from up there. The baseball field, the school roof, your house maybe. It was quiet, except for the wind in your ears and the soft creak of the seat. A kind of hush fell over the heart. Then came the fireworks. They always happened on the last night, just after dark. Everyone found a spot. On blankets, on folding chairs, on the hoods of old cars. Children ran barefoot in the grass. Someone passed out sparklers. And then, with a crack and a rush of white light, the sky opened up. We'd stare upward in awe. Reds, blues, greens, the whole sky blooming like a summer flower. We held our breath after each one, waiting for the next. Sometimes you'd glance sideways and see your dad's face in the glow, or your mom's hands gently clapping. You didn't need anything more, and as the finale burst like confetti over our heads, we knew it was nearly over. The fair would pack up by morning. The lights would vanish. The lot would be empty again. But in that final flicker, that last shimmering fall of silver light, we held on to something bigger than just rides and prizes. We held on to belonging. Because a fair, especially in a small town, wasn't just a collection of booths and blinking lights. It was a moment in time, a shared memory. It was the heartbeat of summer, the laughter of neighbors, the taste of something too sweet, too greasy, too perfect to ever forget. And even now, all these years later, when we catch the scent of caramel corn or hear the soft clink of a prize bell, we're taken right back to dusk, to music, to a field full of joy, lit by stars and Ferris wheels. As the last streaks of sunlight faded behind the rooftops, a gentle stillness would settle across the neighborhood like a warm, familiar blanket. Porch lights flicked on one by one, their soft golden glow cast in halos on the lawn. Somewhere in the distance, a screen door creaked shut, and the buzz of cicadas faded into the background, making room for the quiet rituals of evening. Inside the house, the end of day carried its own rhythm. You could hear the familiar hum of a bathroom fan turning on, the gentle splash of water filling the tub, and the sound of a parent calling your name, not in urgency, but in the soft cadence of routine. "Time to come in," they'd say. And with reluctant feet, we'd leave behind our chalk-covered sidewalks and firefly jars, knowing the evening held its own magic. The bathroom light was always a little dimmer in the evening, like it too understood that the day was winding down. Towels warmed on the radiator. The scent of Ivory soap and Johnson's baby shampoo lingered in the air. Stripped of grass-stained jeans and dusty shirts, we stepped into the bath where warm water welcomed tired limbs, washing away the day's adventures. You'd sit in that tub for a while, not rushed, not hurried, just quiet. Maybe there were plastic boats floating around, or bubbles clinging to your skin. Your thoughts drifted slowly, like foam on water. The echo of your mother's voice might carry down the hallway, checking in on another sibling, or humming softly to the radio in the kitchen. The whole house felt like it was exhaling. After the bath, you'd be wrapped in a soft towel, maybe even carried for a moment if you were still little enough. The hallway was dim, lit by the amber glow of a nightlight or the flicker of the TV in the living room. Pajamas smelled faintly of laundry soap, folded earlier in the day with gentle hands. You might pass by the living room, where Dad was thumbing through a newspaper or adjusting the rabbit ears on the set, and he'd give you a tired but loving glance. The house was warm, safe, familiar. You'd walk with bare feet across the cool floor, down the hall toward your bedroom, where the covers were turned down and a favorite book was waiting. And in that simple act of getting ready for bed, the towel, the pajamas, the dim light, the soft voices, there was a kind of quiet ceremony, a sacred, unspoken ritual that told you the day was done. And you were home. The house had grown quieter now. The clatter of dinner dishes was long behind, and the rustle of the evening news on the television had softened to a murmur in the background. Somewhere down the hallway, the sound of a page turning echoed like a whisper in the hush of bedtime. It was the hour of low voices and lamp-lit corners, when everything slowed and the world felt a little smaller, a little softer. In bedrooms down the hall, nightstand lamps cast warm halos across quilted covers and favorite stuffed animals. You might be tucked in already, hair still damp from the bath, head resting on a pillow that smelled faintly of sunshine and cotton. The blankets were pulled up just so, your favorite toy resting nearby like a quiet guardian of dreams. Then came the creak of the floorboards, the soft shuffle of slippers, a parent's steps approaching. Sometimes it was Dad, his shadow large and comforting in the doorframe. Sometimes it was Mom, with her voice low and lulling, a well-worn book in hand. She might sit at the edge of the bed or settle into the rocking chair nearby, its rhythmic squeak like a metronome for sleep. Story time was never rushed. It wasn't about finishing a chapter. It was about the way the words filled the room. The soft cadence of her voice as she read Goodnight Moon or The Poky Little Puppy was like a lullaby, soothing and familiar. Even when you'd heard the same story a dozen times, it never lost its magic. Each word felt like a gentle pat on the back. Each page turned a soft pull toward dreams. Sometimes, it wasn't a story from a book. It was a memory told aloud. When I was your age, she might begin, and you'd lean in, eyes wide in the half-light, as she described snowy Christmases, firefly summers, or the time she and her siblings snuck cookies before dinner. These little moments wove threads between generations, gently stitching the past to the present. And when the story ended, or maybe trailed off unfinished, there was a pause, a stillness. Your parent might rest their hand gently on your forehead, smoothing back your hair. A kiss on the cheek, a whispered, "Good night, sweetheart." Then the light would dim, the door left slightly ajar, and their footsteps would fade down the hall. The house held its breath with you, not in silence, but in stillness. The ticking of a clock, the low hum of a distant fan, the soft murmur of parents talking in the living room. Those quiet sounds were lullabies of their own, wrapping around you like a second blanket. Sleep hadn't arrived yet, but it was on its way. Just outside the window, the stars had taken their places. As you lay there in the stillness, eyes half-lidded beneath the dim glow of the hallway nightlight, the rest of the house seemed to carry on in its own gentle rhythm. You were tucked in, but life hadn't stopped. It had simply shifted, softened, into something safe and familiar. From the living room, just down the hall, came the gentle murmur of your parents' voices. You couldn't make out the words, not really, but the tone was enough. Low, steady, comforting. They might have been talking about bills, or neighbors, or the weather forecast for the weekend. It didn't matter. What mattered was that they were there, awake, present, guarding the edges of the night. Sometimes, laughter would rise up and drift down the hallway like a warm breeze, a reminder that the world was still spinning peacefully. Maybe the TV was on, playing a late-night variety show or a black-and-white rerun, its light flickering dimly against the walls. The clink of a teacup on a saucer, the rustle of a newspaper being folded, the soft squeak of the recliner as someone shifted their weight. Each sound was a lullaby in disguise. Not musical, but meaningful. Proof that you weren't alone. Proof that someone was watching over things even as you surrendered to sleep. In that quiet symphony of domestic sounds, you found something more powerful than any nightlight or dream catcher. The feeling of being deeply, completely safe. You might have turned over slightly, the sheets cool against your skin, and listened more closely. Not out of worry, but out of comfort. There was something deeply soothing in the predictability of it all. These were the same nighttime sounds you'd heard for as long as you could remember. Like the ticking of the hallway clock or the hum of the refrigerator, they were the background music of your childhood. On rainy nights, you could hear the soft patter on the roof, a rhythm older than memory. On winter evenings, perhaps the furnace clicked on, sending warmth through the floor vents while your father tapped ash from his pipe on the back porch. And in summer, the open window let in the sound of crickets and the occasional passing car, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling like a slow-moving star. And always, the voices, sometimes hushed, sometimes laughing, sometimes just present. They didn't need to say, "You're safe." They didn't need to say, "We're here." Their voices said it all without ever speaking the words. Eventually, those sounds would fade into dreams, not because they disappeared, but because they became part of them, blending into the quiet landscape of sleep, where everything good waited patiently, and then it would come. Sleep didn't arrive all at once. It tiptoed in softly, like a breeze through the curtains, like a whispered promise from the darkness. Your thoughts would slow, your breathing would deepen, and the weight of the covers would feel heavier in the best possible way, like a gentle hug from the night itself. The shadows on your bedroom walls stretched quietly across the ceiling, softened by the faint glow from the hallway. You might catch the scent of fabric softener on your pillowcase, or the distant trace of your mother's perfume still lingering in the air. You didn't think much. Your mind wandered without effort. A baseball game from earlier in the day, the smell of grass on your sneakers, a dog barking 2 blocks over, memories and daydreams blending into one. And in that final moment, just before sleep fully embraced you, there was a sense of stillness so perfect, it felt like magic. Nothing was asked of you. Nothing demanded your attention. The world outside could wait. You were warm. You were safe. You were home. Looking back now, as someone older, perhaps with children or grandchildren of your own, you might realize that those nights weren't just restful. They were foundational. They were the quiet, unseen threads that wove together your sense of the world. They taught you what peace feels like, what it means to be cared for without condition, what it means to be part of something gently enduring. We spend so much of our lives chasing meaning, chasing comfort, chasing rest. But in those simple evenings, with the soft sounds of home, a familiar blanket pulled up under your chin, and the quiet hum of your parents' voices drifting down the hall, you had already found all 3. Maybe that's why these memories linger. Maybe that's why, even now, when life gets too loud or the days feel too long, your mind drifts back to that small room, that soft pillow, that safe little world where everything was just okay. So tonight, as we close this chapter and ease into silence, let that memory settle around you like a second blanket. Let it soften the edges of your thoughts and carry you gently into sleep. The lights are dimmed. The voices are quiet now. And somewhere, in a house much like yours once was, the same bedtime ritual is unfolding for someone else. May their dreams be as gentle as yours once were. And may your sleep tonight be as peaceful as those you've never forgotten. Good night.